Welcome to the in-between,
where shift happens,
the moment between where we are
and where we are going.
We will ask all the questions,
maybe find some answers,
and generally work at being okay.
The mystery of the in-between.
And today's episode is going to be a fun or interesting one. I'm not sure. We're talking about how to get through the day.
That didn't sound very confident at all.
Fun?
Interesting, man.
Well, this is the in-between where we're kind of going through it, that's kind of the point of this podcast is let's talk about those things we're going through and how to go through them. And so that's exactly what we're going to do today. And if you've not
real time,
for real, we're not just going to talk about it. We're actually going to go move through it right here, right now. So if you've not listened to or watched this podcast before, the way this works is we've decided on a topic and one of us comes with questions, or in today's case, maybe some general ideas around some questions we pose to the other, and then we kind of just get into conversation about it and see where it goes. So today we're really going to be in that in-between place because this is like a for real thing happening right now. I don't know. It just seems like there's stuff going on for everybody I talk to more and more than I feel like there ever has been. And, things like overwhelm and frustration and fear and sadness. And just a whole swirl of emotions happening at the same time, let alone like life events. And just the whole thing, just seems to be happening more and more for, I don't know, probably everybody in some degree. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about maybe why, what is actually going on, and then a bit more about what that's like and maybe what we're doing to work through that. So what is going on? Why is this happening?
Oh, is that the official question? What is going on?
I don't know. So, I've given some thoughts to what I think is going on in the world around us that affects me, that makes me feel like things are so overwhelming. I'd be curious to hear from you, what, from your life, your perspective, what is going on that you think this is so common?
Oh, too bad this podcast is short in length. There's so many things, but I'll try to keep it brief. No, yeah. I think it's a mixture of lots of things, and I can only speak personally for me. So I'm just going to only speak personally for me, because I think it's different for different people and what's going on in their lives. I think for me, things have gotten increasingly overwhelming. And I think it's because I'm paying more attention. And I know that's not a bad thing, right? But I think that happens kind of organically when we get to a certain point, and maybe it's a certain point in our lives or whatever, when we look back and say, wow, these ways that I've always thought or ways I've always operated are actually based on someone else's expectations. They're not based on my own expectation, how I want my own life to look, how I want to interact with those around me, how I want to interact with the world around me. And I've been in default mode for a while. And so now I'm going to pay attention. Yeah. And so what I think is when you start looking around, you're like, oh shit, look at all this stuff. Right. And wow, and I think, being intentional with our language, how we show up, how we're interacting, are we living from our values? Where are we not living from our values? Now, how can we shift? It's and all those things are happening simultaneously, right? Yeah. And so I think that can be exhausting and overwhelming. Not that it's not worth it, but I think it can be overwhelming for me, because I'm trying to pay attention. I'm trying to do the things. Yeah. And now I'm recognizing and seeing that there are systems and frameworks and how we've operated, whether it's, in spiritual communities or beyond, in society itself, that are directly in opposition to how I want to show up in my values. And wow, that bumping up against energy, I think can create a sense of exhaustion, right? When we're constantly trying to like navigate, right? Like a world that we're not meant for. You know, it's what it feels like.
Mhm.
It feels
Mhm.
like that I'm navigating a world that is not what I was born for, right? It's just so um, the antithesis of who we are. And I know that's like a broad thing, but that's what it feels like for me.
Yeah.
It becomes exhausting just doing like not to mention, like, the big things that we want to do as far as
Yeah.
individual and collective growth and transformation, but, like, brushing my teeth or feeding myself, that's hard too, right? Because 'Cause you're expending so much energy on the other
Yeah.
things. I mean, some days I have to look down and see if I'm actually dressed appropriately,
Or at all.
right? Right, well, I'm mostly dressed,
Usually. Yeah.
yes, usually.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know, that's what it feels like for me, and I've had other conversations where people are like the same thing, so it's like it's a good thing to be more aware, and then it's like, "Oh, now what do we do with all this awareness?"
Yeah. There's so much information coming at us.
Yeah.
And it feels like maybe that's not new today, like, that's been happening more and
Oh,
more
yeah.
for, I don't know, I mean,
A long
5,
time. Yeah.
5, 10, 15 years. But also it feels like it's happening faster and happening more, like, everything is more intense now than a month ago or a year ago or 5 years ago, right? Like, it's like there's more of it coming in all directions, right? Like, I think 'cause I totally resonate with everything you just said, and I suspect that a lot of people would.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think there used to be more space. There was more space between things happening, like, the intensity and duration and volume at which they're happening now has, like, closed in, right? Like, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, something would happen and it could be as intense, but then there'd be, like, a breath
Yeah.
or space for many breaths, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and as time has gone on, it's felt like that space for breathing, for taking a moment, taking a beat to, like, reground, regroup, de-stress, whatever, that time has, like, shrunken. And I think one of the things that's happening, we talk about, like, these systems and frameworks and how they're impacting all of us and always have. Um, but I think that there's been enough space for certain groups of people, like, that the the space that existed to process has actually just been this massive privilege.
Oh, yeah.
And more and more of us are losing the privilege of that space.
Dude, that was exactly what I was thinking, like and it was so funny that you say that because it's exactly like even as I was saying talking about, like, my own overwhelm, like, I'm aware that people have been experiencing that, like, their whole lives, right? It's been part of, their life story, and I just, like, caught myself recognizing the privilege that now am I realizing, wow, they're not only now, but you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
that, wow, there's all these things that are working against a lot of folks, and I'm like, wow, this has been, like, I don't know, for a long time, longer than either one of us have been alive, that
yeah,
this has been true.
yeah,
Um, and isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Because, like, and it's so isn't that just how we work? It's like, we're okay for life to go the way it's going as long as it doesn't affect us. Like, that over there is happening, that's nothing to do
yeah,
with me.
yeah,
But
yeah.
now I think more and more things that are happening are affecting everyone.
Right.
And so now, like, these conversations that we think are new, I'm sure some folks are like, "What the hell?"
We've been talking about that for
We
50
have been
years. Yeah.
talking and living this, like, our whole lives.
Yep.
And so it is an interesting lesson on our own privilege and how the awareness of that is important.
Yeah.
not like a guilt or anything around that, but the awareness of the privilege and the awareness of our own places of power, right? That for
Yeah.
me is also enlightening that I have where are my own places of power and what is my
Yeah.
responsibility in those places.
Yeah.
And I think all of that seems like a really heavy weight sometimes to process, but it's a necessary, I
Yeah.
think it's a necessary weight
Damn it.
in order for us to get past some of the stuff that we're doing. But it's really interesting that you say privilege. I was thinking the exact same thing. Um,
When I think also like the privilege to pretend, right? Because it's not that these
mm,
things haven't been this intense or this frequent or this what I don't know.
oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they.
Well, we see it more now because
Yeah.
of our like we our instant information age. I mean,
Yeah.
these things, atrocities and um, uh, attacks on human rights and have been going on for like century. I mean, like
Yeah. They're
long
just
time.
they're just all in our face all the
We can
time
see
now.
it
So
now.
we're
Yeah.
seeing all of it, and I think that there's also like this privilege to pretend. Like if you have enough space and enough privilege to pretend that it doesn't affect you, whether you're like, I don't think we're consciously pretending, but like
Right. Right.
I
Right.
think culturally we can pretend this group isn't affected by this because they're this group and this group is separate and they're not connected when in reality they're we're all so interconnected and so immediately impacted by all of these things the same way.
Yeah.
No one is outside of the soup that we're swimming in. um that I think there is this there has been this like ability to turn a blind eye and kind of ignore it and pretend it's not happening, or actually not know it's happening. You don't even need to be aware that it's happening,
Yeah.
and I think that's gone away for most people.
Well, and I recognize that some of that pretending is bandwidth and like,
Yeah. Well, that's
and
yeah,
it's
right.
like,
That's the next part of this
and
conversation.
right, it's like bandwidth and also like coping. Right? I think that that's sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, only we can only absorb so much in our like psyche before we begin to like have to like compartmentalize all the things, right? And so, um, but I think once we become aware of it, then we can kind of like navigate. And I mean, I don't know about you, like I was having this conversation with someone the other day around kind of like the same topic about like they're very overwhelmed, kind of distraught about what's kind of happening in our present reality here in January of 2025, for those in the future.
Yeah.
um and this person was a part of a spiritual community, and this like feeling of guilt because they couldn't like shift their thinking to something positive, or they couldn't
Mm.
like get
No.
out of the
Yeah.
despair that they're feeling. And I was just very blunt and said, "You know what? I'm feeling the same thing, and that's what I'm gonna feel today.
Yeah.
I'm I don't want to, like, think a positive thought. I don't want to shift my thinking. I'm gonna sit in this today because this is what's needed. And you
Yeah.
know what? It may be needed tomorrow, and maybe a week from
Yeah.
now, maybe a month from now,
Yeah.
and that's okay."
Yeah.
And so I think that there is this instinct to, and I think this comes with, like, looking the other way, turn my right, all the
Yeah.
things. It's like, I don't wanna feel uncomfortable. I don't wanna
Yeah.
feel like,
Mm.
because I feel like if I let myself feel that, I will, like, sink into the oblivion and not be able to come out. I think that's the fear. I think oftentimes, when we're talking about challenging emotions, sometimes that is the instinct to avoid expressing or experiencing because we feel like we're gonna be swallowed up by it.
Yeah. Or there's something wrong with us, or we're broken, or
Right,
whatever,
and so
whatever story. Yeah.
I think part of getting through the day, now we shift to kinda like how we do it, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
I
What are
think
you
part
doing to get through your day?
I think part of it is being gentle with myself and feeling the emotions and sitting in it and not trying to, like, get through it quickly or quicker than is helpful, or having these unrealistic expectations that, because I practice a certain, philosophy of spirituality, that I need to do X, Y, and Z,
Hmm.
and if I'm not, then whatever, whatever. And so I think it's really just I'm just having to be gentle and understanding that our bandwidth ebbs and flows from day to day, and honestly, from hour to hour sometimes, and being really paying attention to that and letting it be okay to say, you know what? I'm done. I need to rest. I need to take a break. I need to engage in something that is, whether it's Netflix or eating a whole thing of cheese balls.
Right.
Maybe I'm maybe I'm telling too much on myself, right? But that's okay,
Yeah.
right? That's okay. And so I think that's part of like how I'm getting through the day is just being gentle with myself and not expecting that I have to show up in a certain way each and every day exactly the same. And just paying and also allowing others to do the same thing, right? So I
Mm,
can't be like, oh, I need, whatever. I'm like managing my own bandwidth and then expect too much of other people and for them
yeah.
to act beyond their bandwidth too. So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
very interesting. And I found it's been very supportive for me in this time.
Yeah.
How about you? How you getting through it?
Uh, yeah. I have
Do I
to
need
give
to
it a
send you some
shout out.
cheese balls? Do I need to send you some cheese balls? I
I'm
will.
about to go order some. Somebody told me the other day about a deal. They're like buckets of them on Amazon or something for like,
Oh yeah, man.
yeah.
I have bought and sent people many a bucket of cheese balls during this
Oh,
time.
I might have to invest. No, I need to give a shout out to our dear friend Yvette. I was having a conversation with them the other day, and we were talking about so I don't know how it came up, but the idea of like how do you eat an elephant one bite
Mm,
at a time,
yeah.
and how how like the first time you hear that, it's like if you've never heard that saying before, it's like what? Why are you eating elephant? Like what, you know? And so we were kind of just like toying around with the thought, and it was like, you know what? I think I'd like to stop eating elephant. Like, can I not have to eat like? Can we have
Yes.
something? Um, and just like what a wild idea. Like it feels like, can we interrupt the cycle of all of the things, right? Buying into, I don't know, like in whatever ways we can divest from the systems and frameworks, and whatever ways we can interrupt like the grind, whatever. And so what we kind of came up with was like, how do you climb a mountain? And like the saying is one step at a time. Well,
Mm.
our saying is, how do you climb a mountain with snacks and naps?
Yeah. And someone dragging me up or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Like, let's just do it different, right? And I think for me, that's kind of been my daily,
Mhm.
my attempt anyway, has been to like just be more aware of what is happening right now that I am feeling overwhelmed, or why is this task feel hard, and it's just kind of looking at the thing. Is there something else going on? Am I overworked? Is it whatever? And 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 then like responding accordingly, right? And it's
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I've been overworked and I should really just take a break, or like whatever the thing is. Like, do I need a nap? Do I need food? Do I need do I just need to take a breath? Do I need to go for a walk? Whatever it is. That's been really helpful to an extent, right? Because then there are times where like overwhelm really is overwhelm, and there's like, what do you do? Um, and I think realizing, like, we've hinted at this already today, I'm not sure, but like there's so much information in the world that our brains weren't designed or made, or whatever language you want to put there. They were not designed to take in that much
Yeah.
information, and so like, yeah, all these things really are going on, and if you're paying attention, it is kind of frightening at times, right? And so I think having people or places to kind of like touch base with
Mhm.
has been really helpful. Like, dude, you're not alone,
Yeah.
right? Having somebody to text, having a weekly group to check in with, whatever it is, right? Like having some sort of connection point. It's like, okay, even if this were the worst, we're not alone in it,
Yeah.
Um, and for whatever reason, like that can be hard to remember for me to do. It's like, oh yeah, like connect with somebody, just connect with somebody. And there's something about just even the act of connecting that lets a certain amount of energy to kind of just dissipate about whatever was feeling overwhelming. And then usually, it's like a couple of minutes of venting, and then it's like you just get into conversation about whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. But
And
I
then
mean, I
it's a
think,
conversation about whatever. It's like, oh,
oh,
okay.
this. Yeah. Well, and even in this conversation, I'm recognizing what a privilege it is to be able to look at our own bandwidth and then make decisions accordingly. Like, not
Yeah.
everyone
Oh, yeah.
has that privilege. And so then what it makes me think of is how can I open my eyes enough to recognize um, those individuals in my life, whether I know them or not, or whether I'm connecting with an organization who serves specific folks. Like, where can I create more space for other people to be able to do that,
Yeah.
whether it's through my direct action or whether through it's my like long distance support of a work that an organization or a community is doing to enhance
Yeah.
support for other people. So I think that this is a both and. I think it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
looking at our own, like how we're getting through the day, like how, taking care of ourselves and how we're doing that. And it's also recognizing what actions can I do in order to create that same ability for other people who maybe historically have not had that ability to do that in a way that I have the privilege that I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and so I think that, like, creating that too, and it could just be, like, one little thing, it doesn't have to be these, like, big, like, whatever that we think that we have to do in order for it to make a difference,
Yeah.
and so I think that's how we can, like, collectively help one another too, like, in our own, like, spaces, that energy of that,
Yeah.
and I think even the recognition of the need for that it shifts something, I think, and it shifts how we
Yeah.
show up in the world and then allows other people to show up in the world in a way that's supportive for them, and then it just begins, but it can't begin unless we begin it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to, like, we can think about it, yeah, but then until we actually begin to, like, do that in the ways that we all have different skills and abilities and influences wherever we're at.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that's important too in this whole conversation.
Yeah. And I think, like, whatever the answer is, like, because everyone's going to have slightly different
Right.
thing. I think almost always it's going to come down to doing it together,
Yeah.
right? Like that is if there is an answer, the answer to this whole situation, this whole, you know, dare I say, global experience, like I think is learning how to do stuff together. It's learning how to lean into community, especially here in the United States, because so much of what has got us to where we are right now as a country has been this idea that you have to go it alone, and if you can't, you're not enough, and
Yeah.
you're a failure, right? But that ain't it. That ain't it. It's never been it. It's
Well, and here's
impossible.
the thing, I think we are, reaping the impact of thinking that was it for a long time, right? I know I am. Like, the impact, because I mean, I think we all operate in that, and it
Yeah,
takes a
yeah,
toll. It takes a toll physically, emotionally, mentally, all the uglies, uh,
yeah, yeah,
spiritual I mean, all the things, right? It just does.
yeah, yeah. And I think because we're still in, I'm almost like, how am I gonna? Why me? I'm gonna say this. Oh,
Uh-oh, that makes me nervous whenever you
yeah.
say that.
But
Do we need a bleep button or something?
yeah, for real. But because we are still living in that world
Mm,
by and large, like structurally, that hasn't changed yet.
yeah.
There are times
Uh-oh.
when,
I'm holding my
um,
breath.
there are times where I have found it is necessary to like for today, I'm going to ignore that this is going on and literally practice bypass. And I never thought I would be the one to say that because I'm like, dude, spiritual bypass, like no fucking way. Like you can't, like that's like, emotional death. But there are times that I think that is very necessary. Now, the caveat is I'm not ignoring the fact that this is a real thing indefinitely. Like I'm recognizing it's a thing and like putting it on the shelf for today. Like it's just
Mhm.
too much today. I'm going to totally just check out or put this away or whatever.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it when there's more bandwidth. We'll come back to it tomorrow and check in, right? But like, so I'm not ignoring that it's happening at all, but yeah, I don't know. We need to mark
Yeah.
this day in history or something like.
Well, I mean, what you're speaking of is like, back in the day when I was, a psychotherapist and seeing patients, I mean, that there is a value in doing that because we can't address everything all at once
All the
or
way
we'll
through.
do nothing. It'll be
Yep.
very paralyzing. And so
Yep.
I think that there definitely is appropriate times to like for our own survival and well-being to set some things on the shelf for a bit and
Yeah.
pick them up when we can. And then
Yeah.
that's okay, right? Sometimes just like when you're, working out, right? You start small with smaller weights and then build up as you're able to, as your body is able to handle that
Mhm.
amount. And so I think that is a honestly supportive way of doing it. Otherwise, what happens is then we get paralyzed or then we just bypass indefinitely, right? And so
Yeah.
there has to be this kind of slow flow of processing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Otherwise, it will crack
Yeah. It's flow
or
flow flow management. That's what we'll
flow
call
management.
it.
Right, I mean, because, the same as, like, releasing water on a dam and things like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's I think that's, a universally supportive principle, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
And again, a privilege.
Oh, yes. Also that,
A privilege to be able to ignore, a privilege to have the time to recognize it, a privilege to be like, I can't right now.
yeah. And to also be okay when other people do that, right? We don't wanna shame and blame. We don't
Yeah.
and we I think sometimes in spiritual communities, we shame and blame, not intentionally, often, not intentionally,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it's just not supportive, right? It's not supportive of any of us. And so allowing people to do that and it be okay,
Yeah.
right? I don't need to think a new thought today. I don't need to positive vibes only today. I don't need any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not living bumper sticker lives, right? We're not living those
Yeah.
lives. And
Yeah.
so um, it's okay. It's okay
Yeah.
if we want to roll around in whatever's going on today. That's okay.
Yeah. And I think it also means just allowing other people the grace to like, we have
Yes.
no idea.
Nope.
We have no idea
Nope. Yep.
what's going on for
Yeah.
anybody. And I think the normative culture was to just assume that everybody should be at 100% capacity, working 100% all the time and give you 100% of everything in every interaction and email and whatever. And it's like, that's just not realistic. It was never realistic. And I think
Yeah.
it's even more unrealistic now. Um,
These days, it takes about 50% of my energy to brush my teeth or like, or drink
yeah,
water. I mean, like those
just
little
to get
things.
fed in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Uh,
But here's the thing that we're getting through it.
hmm hmm
And it may not look pretty some days, right? But we're getting through the day
Yeah.
and one foot in front of the other, hand in hand with one another.
Snacks and naps.
Snacks and naps, snacks and naps.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So we're getting through it. And I don't know. We'll let you know how it turns out, I guess. Whenever we get there, wherever that is. So thanks for tuning in to the In Between, where shift happens, and hopefully you have gotten something out of today's conversation. I know I have, and I will speak for Ryan and assume they have as well. because we share a brain
Always.
cell. If you don't
Always.
know that already, we share that single brain cell of ours. So thanks for being here, and we will see you next time on the In Between.
Nobody really enjoys being in the in-between.
But thanks for being here anyway.
We may not have found all the answers,
But certainly some. And maybe more importantly,
a little shift has happened.
and the beauty of it all is that we are not alone in the in-between.
So until next time, we hope a lot of shift happens.